Day number 5. Legea, I hear you have some angels we need to talk about.
Oh, yes. Have you ever seen a real angel? Like what they actually look like according to the Bible?
According to the Bible, I know they have like a shit ton of eyes, and they can be
Yeah,
quite horrific to look at, actually.
exactly. That is really good. Not many people know that.
And it's weird
Um,
that not many people know that because, those who actually would have read the Bible would know this, but hey, what do I know?
right, and it's not all angels. There are different classes of angels. So let me first show you the regular angels that everyone knows from the Christmas story. There it is. So they look rather nice.
Or so we're led to believe. But I think they were supposed to be like archangels or something, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there is a reason why people can be scared of angels. So it's not always that they're described as something wonderful you get to see. Um, yeah, but the Christmas angels are usually presented as good looking and as nice angels because Christmas has a huge part that is addressing children, so you don't want to scare the kids.
Hmm.
In the last picture, it says in Latin, the angel said to the shepherds, don't be afraid. I bring you a huge amount of good news, or bring you very good news. Um, Today, the Savior has been born. So I just translated this from Latin.
Wow.
So that would be the traditional view on angels. And yeah, they can be very different. So those are depictions of angels, what they're supposed to look like, actually.
Yeah. Can be pretty horrific.
But there are different orders or classes of angels, so I'll show you some of them. And there are actually 9, and they become more human when they're a bit lower in the hierarchy. So as you can see, number 1, the seraphim, don't look human at all. And then the cherubim, yeah, they kind of look like flowers in that one picture. And the ball with the eyes, that is the thrones. And then you have lots of angel classes in between that nobody has ever heard of, or at least hasn't heard of if you don't study theology, if you're not really into that. So thrones, dominions, virtues, powers, and principalities are usually the types of angels that you don't regularly hear about. What you may have heard is archangels and angels. So
Right.
angels are the lowest class.
Hmm.
Seraphim are the highest.
Right.
And as you can see, some of them are a lot more human than others. So if those were messenger angels and they were just regular angels of rank 9, then they would have looked pretty human.
Hmm.
And how do we know that messenger angels exist? And who told us what angels look like and what classes they have? Well, there is a man named Enoch. Have you heard of Enoch?
I do recognize the name. I believe Enoch was also a saint, if I'm remembering correctly.
You could kind of see him as a saint, but the problem with Enoch is that he wrote a book that didn't make it into the Bible, and I'll show you the book. Yes, he is related to writing the Bible, but he's kind of an unofficial writer, an unofficial saint.
Hmm.
He's not widely accepted. The reason for that is that only very few copies of the book survived. So, what it is about is that he's brought to heaven and he sees everything with his own eyes. It's a little bit like the Divine Comedy of Dante, where he sees heaven and hell and has a guide who guides him through.
Right.
But it is super interesting, so let me show you what the good man looked like. Here you have him climbing up to heaven. You can tell they wrote Enoch over his head, so...
So we wouldn't be confused, yeah.
So this is him in a Greek version. So he's absolutely depicted as a saint here. And then we have him with the prophet Elijah, and I'll show you both pictures because only one of these two guys is Enoch. And that is the one with the brown shirt.
The one who doesn't look very saintly.
The other one is the prophet Elijah. So that is an Old Testament prophet, and that one actually made it into the Bible. So when you see them sitting next to each other, the one is a published author, and the other one is kind of fanfiction writer. Yes, but these are not the only versions of Enoch we got to see. There are other versions. And there is a reason why Enoch is dark-skinned in these versions. So this is not something that someone at an American college came up with for critical race theory. This is absolutely real. The oldest book of Enoch, the original book of Enoch, was found in Ethiopia. So naturally, he would have been black if he wrote in Ethiopia.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what many people don't know is that Ethiopia was a Jewish colony, so it's up to 4,000 years old, and the imperial dynasty of Ethiopia claims that they or their emperors are descendants of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba.
Wow.
They had an emperor until about the 1970s. And he's worshipped as a god in the Rastafari religion. Like an actual person.
Really?
So this dynasty went on from about the time of 1000 before Christ to 1976, I think it is. His name was Haile Selassie.
Haile Selassie?
Yeah. And he was assassinated. So in Ethiopia, you have the oldest depictions of Jewish and Christian stories. They are the ones who came up with a black version of Jesus. And it's absolutely legitimate in their case because they have this connection through Judaism with the Middle East. So from their point of view, everyone in the Bible could have been black because it's also their book. These people are mixed Middle Eastern and East African. So even when you look at their faces, they don't look very African. They look quite Middle Eastern. Their facial features are Middle Eastern. And even their hair structure isn't like a typical African hair structure because they're mixed people. So Ethiopians are usually a lot more light-skinned than other African people, and they have a hair structure that resembles wool far more than it resembles the more tight and tougher curls that African people have. So Caucasian hair is usually compared to wool, and Ethiopians are closer to that Caucasian structure than they are to the African type hair.
Interesting.
Yeah, so Ethiopia does have a black Enoch because that makes sense, because they have the oldest book. And Enoch 1, the first book, is written in Aramaic or Hebrew, which is a Jewish language, which comes from the Middle East. So they have a huge community that is still Jewish. You can find Ethiopian people who are Jews. It was written in the 3rd century BC to the 1st century AD. So it took them a couple of centuries to write all of this down, and I'll show you why it took them a couple of centuries. Then there is another version that is not connected to the first one. So it was probably a book that was spread pretty wide, but only a few copies survived, so we don't know where the original came from. Could be the Ethiopian, could have happened in Israel. We don't know. The second one is written in Old Church Slavonic, and that is a pre-Slavic language. So that is older than the Slavic languages that we have now, and Old Church Slavonic is used in church, in the Orthodox Church of the East. It's similar to Catholics using Latin. So they also have a very old holy language that they only use for church anymore. That is from the 1st century AD, so at the same time when the last chapters of the first book of Enoch were written in Ethiopia. And the third one is in Hebrew. It's a rabbinic book written by actual Jewish people in the 5th century AD. These are the 3 books of Enoch. And you can buy them nowadays. So what they show is the language of the angels.
Oh.
Yay. It's known as the angelical alphabet, or as Enochian letters or Enochian script. So that sounds really interesting, and it looks weird. If you want to look into that, you can find that. You can actually buy Enoch's books, and sometimes just one, sometimes all 3 together. What they explained to him, what they showed him, was that there are 7 levels of heaven. So this is represented here. And 9 classes of angels. That is part of these books. That he goes very much into the inhabitants of heaven and what heaven looks like and so on. So that's something that you don't find in the Bible so much, because in the Bible they want you to concentrate on God and Jesus and not so much on angels.
Yeah, I guess they've got their own book, quote unquote.
Yes, and there are a lot of these books that didn't make it into the Bible, sometimes because they were just too weird. I think in this case the problem is that the Bible states very clearly that you should only have one God. So it's not good to bring in more deities. And that's kind of what Catholicism did. They brought in all sorts of saints. So they created a staff for heaven. And it's the same with angels. So someone who is a very pure thinker and follows the Bible to a T won't like having other deities appearing. So I think that is why Enoch's book was excluded, because they said, no, we don't need the 7 heavens and everything and the 9 classes and the angelic alphabet and everything. Just keep that with you. We want to concentrate on God alone. The name angel is not a biblical name, so the Bible is not responsible for that. Do you have any idea where it comes from?
I mean, I would guess Latin, but I'm not sure.
Almost. So the original word is agelos, which means messenger in Greek.
Agelos, oh, in Greek, okay.
Yeah, so that's by definition a messenger, and Enoch talked about messenger angels, but as you've seen, there are not only the messengers. So it's suspected that maybe the term agelos was used from the New Testament, from the Christmas story, because in the Christmas story you have these messenger angels, and the New Testament was partially written in Greek. So that's the idea, that people got it from there and they picked up this name and they started using it for all sorts of angels. What they are not is angels. So do you know the difference between angels and angles?
Probably not right away, but it does make me think of Anglo-Saxons. And obviously, like, England is land of the Angles.
Right.
So
I got the
that I
map
know.
for you.
Hey!
Well, I told you that the original Anglia is east of East Anglia, and this map shows that very clearly.
Oh, yeah.
So you see the Angles and Saxons, and then you see the Jutes, and the Jutes are north of the Angles. So the Jutes are in Denmark. The Angles are kind of in between. The Saxons belong to the German tribes, and the Jutes are Danes. So the Angles are usually included with the Saxons, with the German tribes. But, they're kind of on the threshold between Denmark and Germany. Then they made it over to England, and the Angles settled in East Anglia. That is named after them. I wonder why they didn't name it West Anglia, because it's their point of view, It's not...
Well, I think they had bigger ambitions,
Possible.
Not everything pans out.
And the Jutes settled in southern England around Kent. And the Saxons, you can still tell where they settled because you still have their tribe's name in some place names. For example, these three. So they should not be written with an E, they should be written with an A, because the S-E-X in the name means Saxon.
Oh.
And maybe you can tell that these are directions. It's the Western Saxons, the Southern Saxons, and the Eastern Saxons.
Well, it's a good little lesson.
Yeah, and there is something cool about them too. So we're straying a bit away from the Angles for a moment. The original owners of the British mainland were Celtic tribes, and they were pushed to the west by the invaders from the Cimbrian Peninsula. So this, the Danish peninsula is called the Cimbrian Peninsula. So as a Celtic people, these original Britons, they had a word that is Sassenach. Sassenach means foreigner. And it sounds an awful lot like Saxon. So the Celts started to wonder, why do these idiots call themselves foreigners? And the Saxons are, of course, not named after something Celtic, but their name means sword people. So the word sax doesn't mean saxophone, at least not back in the times. It means sword. But back to the Angles, you can still find their name in the name Engelbert, for example. British singer whose name was not Engelbert. His name was Arnold George Dorsey. He's still alive. He was born in 1936. And I don't know for what reason, but he changed his name. He took a stage name, and he started using the name of a dead German composer whose name was Engelbert Humperdinck. So in this case, this Engel can have two meanings in that name. It can mean angel, because Engel is the German word for angel, or it can mean Angel, like the inhabitant of the Anglia Peninsula, south of Denmark.
Fascinating.
That's really cool. So let's close with a communist term for angel. I told you that in communism, people were not allowed to use all their church vocabulary. So we're staying in East Germany with this because on German Christmas trees you can find an angel on top of it. So it kind of looks like the tree is growing out of the angel's bottom.
Okay.
That is a very common thing. So you either have a stone on top of the tree. No, sorry, you don't have a stone. You have a star on top of it.
Mm.
Cut that out.
I will do no such thing. Somebody might have a stone on top of the tree. We don't know that.
That would probably be a bit too heavy. So you either have a star on top of the tree or you have an angel on top of the tree. And I have that in the pictures for the Christmas tree, so I'll show you then. But this angel is called the Christmas angel, and it sits on top of the tree because, you know, angels come from heaven, and it has descended to earth and is watching you while you're celebrating Christmas. That is the ancient idea behind it. And they were not allowed to call it a Christmas angel anymore in communism in East Germany during the Cold War. So the Socialist Party, the SED, came up with a different term that was properly communist. I can say this in German if you want me to, but I'm going to give you the translation. So they started calling it a winged end-of-year messenger.
Winged end-of-year messenger.
That sounds like a name made by a committee.
That's funny. That's very funny.
And it doesn't sound better in the original language. So it's not like it's kind of cute and whimsical in German. It's horrible.
I'll take your word for it.
How about that?
How about that? What a bizarre little lesson on angels. But that's day 5 done. Thank you so much to my YouTube members and Patreon members for all the love and support. It's thanks to people like you that we can keep growing.